Well, hello and welcome to the Alliance Against Exclusion and Restraint live series. My name is Guy Stevens. I'm the founder and executive director of the Alliance Against Exclusion and Restraint. Also, have another job here. I get to be the podcast host here as well. I'm excited to have you here with us today. We've got a great show in store for you. For those of you that may be new here, if this is your first time, welcome. We're excited to have you here. A little bit about the Alliance. We're a small nonprofit, actually located in Maryland, but we work across the country and really across the world, supporting change. Our work started out very much focused on the use of restraint and seclusion in schools, but it's really broader than that. In schools, it's yes, restraint and seclusion, but it's also suspension, expulsion, corporal punishment. Even more broadly, it's all the things that are often done to children in the name of behavior and all the harm that causes. Our mission is really about, kind of ending a lot of the punitive and exclusionary discipline and outdated behavior management approaches and trying to end the school to prison pipeline. So we have a lot of conversations and talk to a lot of individuals about what we can do better, to support individuals who are often not well supported in many of our systems of care. So we're excited to have you here today. I've got a great guest for you here. And as you know, we have many amazing guests. We've got Hough Williams joining us today. We're going to be talking about neurodiversity and inclusion. Really excited about the show today. Do want to share with you a couple of things before we get into the presentation. One is I want to take a moment to share with you that we have a sponsor this year who has been helping to support our work and our podcast, and that sponsor is Bowman Consulting. And Bowman Consulting, Rick and Doris Bowman, I've had the opportunity to get to know them over the last couple of years here. Started out with kind of a meeting at conferences and kind of move from there into, getting to know each other a little bit better. They've been a frequent guest here on the Alliance Against Exclusion and Restraint podcast. And I guess we're actually going to be having them again very soon to talk about a brand new book that they have coming, which is really exciting. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, I want to share with you a little bit about who they are and some of the work that they do. I'm going to pull up a special web page that we have. In fact, they've created a web page specifically for our podcast listeners with some specials and some things that you can learn about their work. But Bowman Consulting does a lot of work kind of in the trauma-informed and neuroscience-aligned space. They put out a book not long ago called Your FBA is a Fantasy. They have a brand new book coming out very soon as well that we're going to be talking about here in about a week or so. But they've set up a special page, and we'll share the link to that down below. But you can find out about some of the specials that they have. They're actually in the midst of updating this page. They've been so busy getting their book out that they haven't had an opportunity to. But the page here talks about some of the upcoming events that they have and the services they offer. They do a lot of workshops and training. And again, the FBA book is really fantastic, but I recommend that you go check them out. They have been a sponsor for us for all of this year, and we really appreciate their support. So check out the Bowman Consulting Group, learn more about their work, and whether you're school-based or a parent, reach out to them and learn more about how they might support you and your journey as well. So with that, I just wanted to, before we introduce our guest here, remind you, if you're watching live, and I see there's already a number of people on live, and again, welcome, really excited to have you. But you know what I always like to ask people, if you're a return visitor here, and if you are, it's good to have you back. We always like to ask people in the chat, let us know. If you're watching on a platform that supports a chat, let us know who you are and where you're from. It's always fun to see that we have, certain people that join week after week, and it's great to see people that join from all across the world. So it's really exciting to have an opportunity to share that with our guests as well. So if you're watching live now, let us know in the chat who you are and where you're joining us from. And with that, let me go ahead and bring up our special guest today. Really excited to have Hough Williams with us today. Lauren is a neurodiversity and inclusion specialist and an experienced special educator, and is the executive director of the program for neurodiversity and inclusion, or PINE. PINE educates and empowers schools and communities to embrace neurodiversity, creating inclusive, accessible, and supportive spaces for children wherever they go. Her work centers around building neuro-inclusive spaces where every child belongs. And we had an opportunity to meet some time ago. And in fact, it was probably well over a year ago, we were talking about having you on the podcast. I always appreciate the opportunity to meet people through this work that are doing things that really make a positive difference. And I remember in our conversation, the work you were doing and the reason you were doing what you were doing and the difference that it makes. So really excited to have you here joining us today and welcome.
Great, Guy. Thank you so much for having me. This has been a long time coming, so it's really nice to finally be here and have the conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're delighted to have you. And I know we had talked about you're going to present a little bit to us,
Mhm.
and then we're going to have a conversation. So we wanted people to have an opportunity to get to know a little bit about who you are and the things that you do, and thought it would be great to have you go through a short presentation. I'm going to bring that up on the screen now. And
Great.
again, if you're watching live, let us know in the chat who you are and where you're from. Say hello. Don't be a stranger. And I want to let you know as well that this is going to be a brief presentation, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to take some questions and comments. And of course, you are welcome if you're watching live to put a question or comment in anytime. And I should have mentioned to you, Lauren, that we'll keep an eye on those comments and questions. You'll see them, but don't worry about stopping mid sentence. We'll come back if we need to. But again, if you're watching live now, feel free anytime to put a question or comment in the chat. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, and I'm going to magically disappear, but I won't be far. So if you need anything from me or something technically happens, just say my name, and you only need to say it once, and then I will pop back up on the screen, and we'll
Magic.
we'll, we'll figure anything out. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off and let you take it away.
Great. Great. Thanks so much. And yeah, I definitely encourage anyone who has some thoughts, please drop things in the chat. Anytime I talk about neurodiversity and inclusion, I often start with this 5-point scale that you're looking at now. For anyone listening, it's a 5-point scale, right? Starting at 1, going up to 5, and a number 1 means the term neurodiversity is totally new to you, right? Number 2 is you know a little. Number 3 is you're familiar, but maybe you don't want to be asked to define it in front of a lot of people. Number 4 is you know a lot about neurodiversity and you're learning more. And then a level 5 is do you have a deep understanding of neurodiversity? And I've been using this visual for years and asking audiences, where do you fall? Is neurodiversity something that's really new to you? Or is it something that you actually know an awful lot and you're learning more? And 10, 15 years ago, when we were talking about neurodiversity, for lots of folks, they identified at being kind of like at a 1 or a 2. This was a really new term to them. And now, we present and talk to schools across the country and organizations across the country. It's very unusual to have a room full of people for whom neurodiversity is very new. It has become much more of a common, it's common language when we're talking about education, which is really exciting for those of us who have been working in the neurodiversity space for some time. But if you're someone for whom neurodiversity is a newer concept, I want to make sure that we can kind of anchor in a really solid shared understanding so that we can have a really good dialogue about neurodiversity and our neurodiverse spaces, specifically in schools. So neurodiversity refers to the natural and valuable diversity of human brains and minds. And when I think about neurodiversity, I often think about what's called the neurodivergence umbrella. And I'm pulling from the work of Sunny Wise. If anyone would like to follow their work, they're at livedexperienced.educator.com. And Sunny talks about this neurodivergence umbrella and really understanding neurodivergence as a constellation of differences, autism being one of them. Autism falls under this neurodivergence umbrella, as does learning disabilities, ADHD, dyslexia, as well as a whole spectrum of mental health conditions and sensory processing differences. And so when we're talking about neurodiversity and when we're talking about neurodiverse spaces, we have to think about all of the different neurotypes that really show up. And one of the things that we talk a lot about at Pine, and I'm sure many folks in the audience are also familiar with, is our school communities. They are neurodiverse, right? They're made up of individuals with a range of neurotypes, right? Including autism and ADHD and all of those different aspects of neurodivergence that we were just talking about, right? As well as individuals with no disability or neurodivergence. Okay, so a nuance of the language that I want to make sure to really talk about in this conversation is when we say neurodiverse, right, neurodiverse communities, we mean all neurotypes together. And so one of the realities of today is that our school communities are neurodiverse, and we all play a role in really building a space of belonging for teachers of all neurotypes, students of all neurotypes. Um, this is now all work that we need to participate in. And so one of the things that our program really challenges every professional who's holding learning space in a school is, how can we build more equitable neurodiverse school communities? And I think for a very long time, many people thought of this work as the work of the special education teacher, right? Or the work of the paraprofessional who may be supporting an individual student, or the work of an SLP or another related service provider, work that is happening in discrete spaces or done by discrete people in a school. But what we know now and what we see every day is that this is work that the entire school community needs to take on. And so whether you're a gen ed teacher, a special ed teacher, a paraprofessional, or an administrator, you play a really critical role in building a neuro-inclusive space for every single student in the school, right? This is really community-focused work. And one of the things that we really believe in Pine is that every child really deserves to learn in an environment that both recognizes but also supports their unique strengths, right? Regardless of their neurotype. And so when we're partnering with the school, one of the things that we really offer is, what is the coursework that you need in order to do this work really well and to understand the students that are in your classroom, right? What are the resources you need? What is the coaching that you need? What is the community of learning that you really need in order to better understand this very diverse community of learners that are in front of you? And for some teachers, I think this work is very much in line with what they've always done, right? That's oftentimes the case with some of our special education teachers. Perhaps was a really big part of their pre-service training. But more often than not, we find that there are many teachers for whom they never had any training in understanding neurodiversity or in best practices in inclusion. And so we're trying to really fill that gap and make sure that every single professional in a school has a really solid foundation of understanding neurodiversity and inclusion and the role that they play in this work. And I think this really requires a balance, and this could be a really interesting conversation for us to have, is around mindsets of the individual staff members and also the methods, right? The practices that they use in the classroom. And I have a really interesting debate with a favorite colleague of mine as to whether or not, is it more important to have the methods before the mindset, or more important to have the mindset before the methods? And I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, chicken or egg, which one comes first, because they drive one another, right? When you begin to really shift your thinking to more of an neuro-inclusive mindset, those methods and those practices that drive the work come a little bit easier. And when you use those methods in your classroom or in your learning spaces and you see success, it begins to shift your mindset. And so what I would like to chat about today is some specific mindset shifts that we've explored really deeply at Pine that I think really does help educators and community members really build those neuro-inclusive spaces where every child belongs. So the first mindset shift that I want to talk about is really celebrating neurodiversity as a welcome part of human diversity, right? And so the work here is really moving beyond retrofitting, right, after the fact, and really imagining what makes a truly inclusive learning environment for the start and not shifting after the fact. And so when we're working with educators, we often really talk about, how could you reimagine your space, your classroom, your learning environment, your routines, your expectations, so that you're providing proactive supports that, for example, honor individual student sensory needs, reduce the expectation that they mask, right, or hide their neurodivergence in the space, creating spaces where movement is welcome and stillness is not the only way to learn. And so this is some of the work that we really talk about in terms of celebrating neurodiversity. Um, Another mindset shift that we talk about, which I think is going to be really familiar for the inclusionists that are tuning in, is to remember that inclusion itself is a mindset. It's not a destination. It's not specific four walls within your school. It's a mindset and it's a commitment that we make every single day. It's not the responsibility of one teacher or one team. It's really the shared responsibility that we all have in a school. Um, and so one of the things that we oftentimes will explore with folks who are a little bit newer to neuroinclusion is to say, what is just one part of your student's day, for example, where inclusion could be more intentional? Right? Where inclusion is a mindset that follows you and follows your students across their days. That could be arrival in the morning. It could be, lunchtime. It could be assemblies, right? What are some of the steps that you can take to make sure that we are proactively creating inclusive spaces everywhere and not just in specific classrooms? And I think one of the important ways that we need to do this is also to really reflect on who are we looking to and who are we learning from if we want to know more about neurodiversity and inclusion. Now, I come to this work as a special educator by training. I do not identify as neurodivergent, and so I can bring my experience as an educator to this space of inclusion. But I don't consider myself a neurodiversity expert because I don't have the lived experience of being neurodivergent. And I think if we are going to learn about neurodiversity, if we are going to really be truly neuro-inclusive, we need to find ways that we can center the voices of those with lived experience. And our neurodivergent students are in that collection as well. And so, at Pine, right, in our program, all of our courses, all of our resources are co-developed with neurodivergent experts. So if you are learning about supports for your autistic student, you are learning from an autistic professional, right? And I think that is a really big shift for many educators and many school communities to really think about, and it really follows the lead of the disability rights movement and the concept of nothing about us without us. And so I think finding ways, whether you're planning a school assembly or a staff meeting or a lesson, can we find opportunities to really center the voices and the perspectives of the neurodivergent community? We're very lucky that many neurodivergent experts are very active on social media. And so who can we look to? Who can we go to? Who can we listen to and learn from? These are just a couple of the neurodivergent experts that we have partnered with at Pine, and some of the feedback that we actually get from our educators who are going through our coursework and our coaching is that this lived experience perspective is one of the most valuable aspects of the professional learning. So finding ways to build this into any professional learning that a school is doing is really important. Some of the things that we really explore is actually how to listen also to our students as their own experts of their own lived experience. On the screen, for those of you who are looking, we have a student profile sheet. The profile sheet actually outlines here an individual student's strengths, the things that they find really challenging, the things that are really helpful for them, the things that are really not helpful for them. So how can we look to and listen to even our own neurodivergent students as the experts of their own experience is another big piece to this. The next mindset shift that we think about a lot, and I think is really critical if you're going to be building these neuro-inclusive spaces, is to commit to strengths. And for some reason, this is sometimes very challenging. And I think it comes from a good place. I think it comes from educators. When I was in my early training, I was taught to be a really sophisticated deficit detective, right? And I used to pride myself on being able to figure out exactly what my students couldn't do. I'd make a list of those things, and then I would one by one tackle each of those deficits. And it was coming from the best of intentions, but what that was missing, and what I didn't understand, is actually the detrimental effects that can have on a student, and also the missed opportunity of leaning into strengths. Right? Every time our students share their strengths, share their interests, it's really it's an invitation to connect with our students. It's an invitation to lean into what they can do. And I think that this really challenges that traditional, more of a medical deficit-based model of, instead of fixing the student, we are focusing on instead looking at what are the areas of interest, areas of brilliance, and areas of possibility that we want to really lean into. Um, and so how can we, for example, create spaces where students share what they love, that this is used as a tool for connection and for engagement and for actually connecting with academic content, and not defaulting to what often happens, which is students share what they love, and then teachers withhold it and have students try to earn it back, which we've all made that mistake, or at least I have. And I learned very quickly that my students didn't trust me and didn't share what they loved because they knew I would remove it and have them earn it as some sort of reward system, which is a real error, that I luckily learned a lot from. Um, if anyone is watching, you do see that there's a QR code on the screen. Please feel free to scan that code. And I'm happy to share with you a strengths checklist that you're welcome to use with your students, with yourself, with your kids. I'll just talk for a minute so the slide stays up a little bit longer for anyone who does want to scan that. I'm happy to share that as a free resource for those of you that are joining today. And I think one of the things that goes along with this commitment to strengths is also a presumption of competence, right? If we're going to build neuro-inclusive spaces, we need to start with the belief that every student is capable of learning, is capable of connection and growth. And this presumption of competence shows up with us really trusting and believing that every student can succeed, and that every student is whole right now, not after they meet some certain expectations, not after they unlock the next step. And I think this is how we really build that culture of belonging, where everyone is seen and valued for who they are. And I think presuming competence needs to show up in very specific, actionable ways. It's not just a mindset that we keep in our heads. This comes out in how we use identity affirming language for students. This assumes that every student has something to say, even if they're not using mouth words, right? This comes out when we talk to students and not over them to an adult that might be supporting them. Right. So I think there are lots of different ways that we can really demonstrate our commitment to presuming competence. And I think with that also comes with us really rethinking behavior. And I know that this is something that this community thinks about a lot and talks about a lot, which I think is fabulous, because we're constantly challenging some of the traditional views of behavior. And we really need to reframe that it's not quote unquote good or quote unquote bad. Behavior is information. It is one form of communication. And when we really create a space for deep connection and relationships with students, we can help them feel safe and help them feel stood and help them feel accepted. And that can help them regulate and navigate some of the really challenging situations that can lead to stress and distress, which we might see showing up in school. And I think we're constantly helping professionals and parents and even the students themselves really think about what's underneath, right, that iceberg of behavior, right? And how can we actually show our students that we are listening to them, that yes, they might be yelling, they might be shutting down, they might be crying, they might be saying they don't want to do work, but that's not the whole picture. right? We have to really look underneath the water and ask ourselves, right? Um, does this student feel safe? Does this student feel like they have choice and they have control? Does this student have the ability in this moment to articulate and ask for help? Are there sensory challenges that this student is kind of working through? So we really need to look beneath the surface if we're really going to understand where some of the behaviors are coming from, and if we're going to help students really successfully self-advocate, right? Which is the another aspect of creating neuro-inclusive spaces, is that students are not taught to be compliant. They are not taught to be quiet and folding their hands. They're taught to understand who they are as learners, and they're taught to self-advocate when they need to. And this isn't something that just happens, right, naturally. It's something that has to be supported, and it has to be really nurtured. So how can we, as the adults around students, really be the allies who can help students recognize their own needs, articulate their own needs, and really help them take ownership of what helps them feel really safe and feel really successful in schools. And so, one of the ways that we do this in classrooms is to really help students, for example, ask for breaks proactively, articulate what kind of break that they need. We don't want students white knuckling it through their days. I would so much rather have a student self-advocate and say, I need a break, and then have them miss out on a demanding task. I'd much rather have them do that proactively than experience undue stress, get overly escalated, right, melt down, and then have us have to figure out, okay, so now what do we do after the student has already experienced something so challenging? And so I think self-advocacy, it is a skill, and it is something that we need to help. It's not just going to happen automatically. Um, and the last couple that I want to just highlight before we come back together to really talk, and this one is a mindset shift that I have made more recently, and I want to be honest about that. I think for a very long time, I focused on my students need to be independent. They need to be independent. They need to be independent. They need to be independent. And what I was missing is that very few of us are independent at all times. Um, we are oftentimes at our most successful and safe when we are interdependent, right? Independence is not the ultimate marker of success. Our goal isn't to separate or to fix in isolation. It's to help our students connect and feel really supported, right? That's the interdependence. So what does it look like, for example, to really normalize asking for help, and working together in your school or classroom culture, right? Looking to one another for help and for support. It's not something that you have to do all on your own. And I think this subtle shift towards valuing and really helping students see the value of interdependence is a really important one, and can really help us build these more truly neuro-inclusive spaces. Um, and then the last mindset shift, again, which I don't think is going to be new to folks, but should always be something that we remind ourselves of, is that just like our students, we are always learning, right? We don't have all the answers, and we don't need to, right? What we do need to do is to stay open and stay curious and really commit to growing alongside our students every day. And sometimes that means new tools, sometimes it means new language, sometimes it means new frameworks, but finding ways to make sure that we are constantly learning. Thinking about new opportunities to foster more meaningful connections with our students. You may need to learn more about, the AAC device that your student is coming in with, or an OT tool that you notice a student using. So finding ways to really grow your understanding of neurodiversity and inclusion and truly student-centered practices. So I'll leave this part of the conversation with just this reminder that creating this culture of belonging, it really is whole school work, and it's work that benefits everyone. Because when we design these physical spaces and we create learning opportunities and craft experiences with everyone in mind, we send the message authentically that everyone belongs here. And so, I'm really looking forward to having a conversation and really talking a little bit more about how do you do this work of building more neuro-inclusive spaces, and sharing any tips and tricks that we've learned along the way at Pine.
All right. Well, thank you. And I'm going to go ahead and make your slides disappear, if that's
Great.
okay. And give me 1 second here. There we go. All right. Well, I really appreciate that. And I was actually taking lots of little sticky notes
Ah,
as you were talking, just because something would strike me. And there were a lot of things that struck me, and probably in no particular order. I could probably start at the end where you talked about benefiting everyone, which I thought was such a powerful point. I mean, we talk about this even in the context of things like reducing and eliminating restraint and seclusion, how at the end of the day, the same things that we're going to do that are going to benefit the children that we're supporting, also benefit the teachers and the staff, and by extension, the families and their communities. So, I mean, I'm a big believer that the same changes that we can make, and that applies very much to this work, really does go upstream. And sometimes change seems hard, and people, become a little resistant to it. I also love that, before you got there, you said something about, let me see if I can find that note wherever I put it here. But it was about always learning, and this idea that when we're always learning, and one of the things that I think is so critical to this work is that persistent curiosity. Like, when we are driven by curiosity rather than judgment or making our minds up about things, we tend to dive in deeper, ask more questions, get a better understanding, and ultimately do better. So I love that as well. I want to pause for a second and just say that anyone who's watching live, you have an opportunity to leave a question or a comment in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. You can also let us know where you're from. And one of the things I often mention is we get people from all over the world, and so frequently that we have repeat guests that come back there and tomorrow already. It's probably what, 7, 8 a.m. on Friday, but it's always great to see you, Marion. We get a lot of people that come, episode after episode, and really from all over New Zealand, Australia, the United Kingdom. We have somebody here, Casey from Optimal Access. Said, thank you. I particularly love to hear Nothing About Us Without Us. Absolutely. Strengths-based learning, addressing the problem with making kids earn what they love. We're going to come back to that because that's a big one for me as well. Thanks for your comment there. So if you're watching live and you have a comment or you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat. I got a bunch of sticky notes, so I have enough to keep us going for a while, but we always welcome your questions and comments. So again, I love where you were leading us there, and there were a lot of kind of head nodding moments here. I mean, yes, Nothing About Us Without Us. But let me pause before I get to all of my questions, and I want to give you an opportunity to tell me a little bit more about Pine. And what I'm going to do here, if you don't mind, I'm going to actually bring up the website here, and
oh,
I'd love
great.
for you to tell us a little bit about what is Pine, what kind of services, supports do you offer, what do you do? You kind of hinted at it a little bit in the presentation talking about what you do, but I'd love just while we're looking at this to have you lead us through kind of what it is you do, and you got a membership hub and you've got a community. Like, what are the things that you're doing, and who are you doing them with and for?
Absolutely great. Thank you. Yeah, any opportunity, we're really excited about the work that we're doing at Pine. And the work really started with how to support schools, right? So what we were hearing just again and again from educators and district leaders and building principals was, we have more and more neurodivergent students that are in our classrooms. They're seeing an increase in the number of students coming in with neurodivergent diagnoses and whatnot, and also we have more students being educated in more inclusive classrooms, right? Which is a fabulous indicator of progress as far as inclusion is going. So we have more students identified as neurodivergent showing up in more classrooms, but the challenge was that meant there were more teachers who were supporting more neurodivergent students with more needs, and they didn't necessarily feel like they had the training, right? So if you're a general education teacher who has never had any special education training, and suddenly you have, 5 neurodivergent students in your classroom, and you don't understand the best way to support them, that was the gap that we were really looking to fill. And traditionally, this work was always done by super training the special education teacher, right? Or providing additional training to the paraprofessional, or really overly relying on the school counselor. And what we really wanted to think about is, what if every single staff member in a school had a really solid understanding of neurodiversity and inclusion from a strength-based perspective, right? Informed by the expertise of those with lived experience. And what we found was these supports helped every educator better support their neurodivergent students. But perhaps even more interesting than that, these were tools that actually help them support all kids. And so really breaking down these silos between quote unquote gen ed and special ed, and the gen ed students and the special ed students, I think is a really important mindset shift and a really important practice shift, when you realize that there aren't a special toolbox of strategies that are used only for students with ADHD, right? We begin to recognize student need regardless of neurotype, and find ways to better support all kids in our classrooms. And that was the impetus, right, behind Pine. And so what we're able to offer to our partner schools is kind of 3 different buckets of support. First of all, we have an entire catalog of courses, both long courses and short courses, co-developed with neurodivergent experts on best practices in neurodiversity and inclusion. So if you would like to learn more and you're not quite sure where to go, you can start with some of our foundation courses and really build your own personal kind of professional learning journey around neurodiversity and inclusion. So courses are something that we offer. Alongside our courses, we have a library of resources. So imagine being a teacher and not knowing quite where to start. You can actually pop right into our library and you can download the checklists and the planning tools and the visuals that you want to try to use to support your student. So that's another big part of our work. And then the last area of support is coaching. So any teacher or team can call one of our subject matter experts and have an office hour and say, hey, I've got this kid who's really struggling with writing and I'm not quite sure where to go next. Here's what I've tried. Here's what's worked. Here's what hasn't worked. And that could just be a one-off conversation. Or you could come back every month, every week if you want, and say, okay, so now here's what I've tried. Where do I kind of go next? And so we're really looking to provide that system-wide support across schools. And then the other thing that I will mention is, one of the things that we started to then hear from our community is, I was actually not from educators who were in K-12 schools, but camp providers, after-school providers, community organizations who were saying, that's all well and good, but all of those students who are being supported in their classroom, they're coming into my environment after school and my staff isn't trained. And so we opened Pine Community, which is a vehicle which lets us provide training and resources to anyone who is supporting K-12 students outside of the school space and the classroom environment. So currently we have a course designed specifically for after-school providers and camp counselors. And next up, we have some courses specifically designed for parents, which we're going to be releasing shortly, because we know that parents are always looking for good neuro-inclusive supports.
That's fantastic. I appreciate you kind of sharing all that with us. And can you tell me, is there a geographic area that you support, or do you work all across the,
All across the country, and we've got
Okay.
some international folks who are asking as well.
Okay.
And it's not just public school, although the majority of our contracts are oftentimes with public schools. But we've got private nonprofit schools that are also engaging, because we're seeing neurodivergent students are in every school, they're in every classroom, and so we have to find a way to better support our teachers. Because also the thing that I talk about with a lot of leaders is, this isn't going to change. Right? This isn't like a blip that we just happen to have a lot of neurodivergent students now.
Right. Right.
we live in a neurodiverse community. We have a neurodiverse community of learners and of educators. And the better we can all be at understanding neurodiversity and being really facile with supporting folks with different needs, right? The more equitable and inclusive our learning spaces are going to be.
Love it. Before I leave your website, I just wanted to mention you've got an event coming up here. I wonder if you might tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes. So we have our Pine Summit, which is a virtual conference coming up in April, on April 23rd. Registration opens on March 2nd, so mark your calendars. It is a virtual conference. We have all neurodivergent presenters this year who are going to talk about really practical tools to use at home, to use in schools, to use in community organizations. We're really excited about this conference. Folks can register to join live on the 23rd, or they can actually register to get access to the recordings through the end of June. And so we're really excited to see lots of folks there. And if you want to learn more about our four presenters, we've got write-ups on our website.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to go ahead and make that go away and go back to you and I and a little bit of a discussion here. And I've got a couple of questions, but I just wanted to hit, I think, yeah, I saw a comment here a second ago. Thank you for acknowledging the need for students to have access to reliable communications and permission to self-advocate. Yeah, that's such an important comment there. In fact, I want to hit on that a little bit. I'm kind of curious because, I'm a big believer in self-advocacy and even through, my own family's journey, kind of had some, what I thought was really important, ideas around that. And that was, I can think back to a time with my son where, I worked with him. We actually took his IEP and we ended up kind of like, I created what I called his Bill of Rights. We kind of took his IEP and we simplified it down to one page of, these are the things that you can advocate for, that you have a right to, and to really get him involved in knowing what his needs were and what he could do about it. I always promote that idea of encouraging self advocacy. Now, the flip side is that I've seen educators that are receptive and supportive and see the positivity behind that. But I've also seen some that are resistant when a child begins to advocate for themselves. When we have people that are in kind of a compliance or control mindset, I've seen that go the wrong direction as well. So I'm kind of curious, how do you help educators and others kind of not only to encourage that self-advocacy, but to really understand why it's important to accept it? Because I know kids that one time when they go to advocate for themselves, if they get a no, they may never come back and try that again because of what happened. So I'd love you to drill into that, because that to me is something that's fascinating, because I think it's really important to encourage. But having seen a negative side of that, I think, well, gee, what can we do to get people in that mindset?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really important question, and I don't think there's a super easy answer. I mean, I remember being in the classroom and being constantly afraid that I was going to lose control of the class, right? There's this constant fear of, like, am I doing the right thing? Is someone going to walk into the room and they're going to question what I'm doing? I think that educators are under a tremendous amount of pressure, and I think. I follow the work a lot of Dr. Jillian Boudreau. Anyone who wants to follow her, please take a look at her website. And she talks about this kind of culture of fear, and she talks about the district that puts pressure on the school leader, and the school leader puts pressure on their teachers, and their teachers put pressure on their students. So here we have our little tiny students who are at the bottom of this kind of inverted pyramid of fear and pressure. And so I think when I find an educator who is white knuckling it, and who is really focused on control and compliance first and relationship building second, I do know where it's coming from.
Mhm.
And I remember being in, pre-service training as a teacher, and being told the really classic thing of, don't smile the first month, right? You need to show those kids who's boss first, and then later you can kind of relax a little bit. And so I think that there's a lot of unlearning that many educators have to really go through to better understand that actually some of the best ways to support your students is actually to give them choice and
Right.
actually to
Right.
give them autonomy. And I think there's such a contradiction. Many of us who are teachers and parents, what we want is we want kids to be internally motivated, right? That's what we want. That's the most important thing. We want self-determined kids. But in order for kids to really experience self-determination and to feel that internal motivation, they need to feel connected to the
Mhm,
people
mm,
around them,
mhm, mhm,
right?
mhm.
They need to feel really competent in what they're doing, and they need to feel like they have some autonomy,
Right.
right? And
Right.
when those
Right.
three
Right.
things are in place, that's when kids are really internally motivated. And so whenever
Mhm,
I'm
mhm.
I'm talking to a teacher or a parent and they're getting into battles, right, with the kid, sometimes those are just the three things I look for, right?
Yeah.
Does this kid
Yeah.
feel competent? Does this kid feel like they're autonomous? And
Yeah.
does this kid feel really related? And so I think that can be a really interesting way to analyze
Mhm,
some
mhm,
of
mhm.
those behaviors on the part of the educator, because I don't think that by and large most educators, they're not trying to be mean to kids, they're not
Right.
trying to just control for control's sake. I think it comes from a sense of fear and a belief that this is how I'll help this student find calm,
Mhm, mhm,
is if I can just control them and get them sitting down,
mhm,
then we can do the real work. And the
mhm.
irony is you're actually getting in the way of the real work by
Right.
by forcing that
Right. Right,
compliance,
right, right, right.
right?
Yeah, and killing the intrinsic motivation that is going
In the
to
process
drive the
that you're then like, I
curiosity,
don't
that's
know
gonna
why
drive
he's
the
not
learning.
motivated.
Yeah, the goal that you have. Yeah, there were a couple things you said in that response, and one of them, unfortunately, there's a couple of people that live in my head, and pop up periodically when certain things are said, and my little Alfie Cohen popped up for a second when you were talking about, this idea of, making decisions, and there's a quote somewhere in there about the way that kids learn to make decisions is by actually making decisions, but sometimes we don't allow kids to make decisions.
Mhm,
And I think it,
mhm,
it it can be difficult, and again, I think because of the expectations, because of the norms, it can be difficult. But I think a lot of this comes back to what you talked about very early on, which is a mindset. And how do
mhm,
we shift away from a power over mindset to a power with? How do we move away from doing things to people or doing things for people to doing things with people? And that's what's at the heart of all of this, right? I mean, nothing about us without us. Well, all of that kind of brings back to this idea of, kind of co-creation and working together, and but it is certainly not, kind of the mindset that we have. But I think reminding people of the end goal here, I think, is really important. Reminding
mhm.
people of what we're trying to, kind of accomplish in all of this, is really critical as well. So I appreciate that. Um, Couple other things that I had for you. And again, if you're watching live, if you have a question or a comment, you feel free to put it in the chat. I saw a comment here, and I don't remember exactly what this point when this was on, but we got a and the same
Mhm,
for students. Yes, they feel it all.
mhm.
Um, I wanted to just ask you. This is a very general question, but um, what brought you to where you are now? So, I know you talked about your career a little bit, but how did how did you end up in education to start with, and what kind of led you down this pathway? So tell us a little bit more
Yeah.
about. And I see you
Oh,
have a dog that
oh,
just came and
I
visited.
have a
We
dog
we
that's
we we,
joining.
we love
That's
dogs,
that's
so yeah,
that's okay. Dogs can join.
yeah,
All
we're
right.
always dog friendly. It's
All
perfect.
right. Well, sometimes that happens. Biscuit's joining us today,
Yeah.
which is really great.
Well, you
He's
you you
sitting.
tell you tell Biscuit that dogs are some of my favorite people. So,
Oh,
Biscuit is
Biscuit. Oh,
always
he'll be
welcome.
he'll be happy to hear. I'm going to fill him in on the notes
All
afterwards.
right, sounds good.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your journey. And
Yeah.
what continues the curiosity you have today.
Yeah, I always wanted to be in the special education space. Ever since I was, in high school, I started volunteering at schools and homes for disabled communities. So it was always really, I always knew I wanted to work in that space. In college, I had to kind of make the decision, right? Am I gonna go the education route? Am I gonna go the research route? I was a big lab rat in university, and so I was trying to figure out, like, well, maybe I'm going to go into genetics, maybe I'm going to go into neuroscience, and kind of look at the biology of things. And the fact of the matter was, I just didn't want to be in the basement. I really wanted to be around kids, and so I made the shift.
They let some researchers out of the basement, I've heard.
Not the type of research I was. It was not. It was in a basement. It was a giant microscope. And I remember going to a job interview. I was working at a preschool at the time, kind of also interviewing in the research space. And the researcher said, how was your day? And I had been at the school, and I said, oh, it was great. I had a great time. What I didn't realize is that I had handprints. I had like paint handprints all over the back of me from the students that I was working with. And they saw that as a problem. And I was like, oh no, that's just the way it is. So, I decided that research was not for me, and I really wanted to go into education. And I moved to New York City and started the Teaching Fellows program. And I was lucky enough to be put in a school in East Harlem. And I taught a 12 to 1-to-1 class in an elementary school, and got to work with lots of different types of students. And then I moved into teaching in the New York City NEST program, which is for autistic students, an inclusion program in the city. And when I was there, I really saw not only how important it was that we opened more inclusive classrooms across the country. We were seeing inclusion being so successful in those programs, but also the value of ongoing teacher training and educator professional development, and how it's just not enough to have your pre-service training and then like the day and a half that you get every August. How do we continue to build the capacity of educators across the school in understanding neurodiversity and inclusion, especially when neurodiversity and inclusion were kind of newer concepts, and there were some schools that were doing it really well, and there were others that really weren't. And so how do we make sure that we can really be at the forefront of this aspect of inclusion, so we could support all kids? And I think some of the most important work that I have done has also been working directly with neurodivergent professionals, right? And yes, there are lots of books written by a lot of great researchers, and many of them would identify as neurotypical or part of the neuromajority. And while that is valuable, there is nothing as important as really listening to community and saying, what was school like for you, right? What was it like when you had a teacher who didn't understand you? Right? What was it like when you were walking through a high school hallway trying to navigate that sensory onslaught? Like, what do you wish had been different? And I think that has been and continues to be the most, I think, important aspect of my own training. And now I'm lucky enough to have two kids that also I continue to learn from and refine my thinking all the time. So I think that's been another really important piece as well.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I think that again, back to the curiosity. Curiosity is my favorite, one of my favorite words, and compliance is one of my least favorite words. So there it is. I mean, not that everybody has a favorite words list, but I do think it's important, and I think wherever you are, whoever you are, I think that ongoing curiosity is really important. I'm curious, have you done anything in the realm of higher ed in terms of the work that you do?
Yeah, I actually worked a little bit. So the Pine program is based at NYU. We're really lucky to be working there, and we've grown this program there. And another program that NYU has that I was able to work in and help build initially is the NYU Connections program. And the Connections program is designed for autistic undergraduate and graduate students at NYU. It is an autistic-led organization. It is not something that is focused on social skills training or anything like that. It is about building community. So any any student, undergrad or grad, who identifies as autistic can actually meet with a mentor once a week to talk about whatever they want to talk about, to support
Mhm,
them in
mhm,
any way that they want to be supported, and also meet with other fellow neurodivergent students
mhm,
at
mhm,
NYU. And again, it's not about some sort of compliance procedure.
mhm,
It's
mhm,
not about making sure that you have access to whatever you need. It really is about identity and community.
mhm,
And
mhm.
so I think that was a really interesting project
Mhm.
to be
That's
part of.
great. That's great. Yeah, one of the things I often think about is that, unfortunately, I think that the things that you focus on and the things that we've talked about today are really critical, and they should be more interwoven into a lot of our higher education curriculums for educators. And unfortunately, there's a lot of things that could go into an educator's, kind of coursework, but these are gaps. These are things that are not typically part of programs, and I still think there's a tremendous opportunity to begin to see more of these things moving into some of the curriculums. But unfortunately, there are a lot of gaps. There are a lot of gaps, and I think that leads to educators that begin their career that haven't been exposed to some things that are really critical. And then, of course, one of the challenges can be, and you know this all too well, the life of an educator is one that has a tremendous amount on their plate. And I was on a thread the other day on social media, and I don't remember what the channel was, but that's not really terribly important. But somebody had posted something. It was a kind of a group with a lot of educators, and an administrator posted something about doing a book study. And all these comments were like, "Don't do a book study. There's just not time. We don't have time. We don't have time for this. We don't have time for that." You really feel for that, because that curiosity and digging in is so important. And of course, at the Alliance, we host book studies, and we actually have an educator series, and we get a lot of amazing educators from kind of all over the country and all over the world that participate in those. But it's really difficult, and I just kind of have to wonder, like, how we can remove more barriers, because sometimes when you have so much on your plate, one more thing just seems unbearable. And there's a lot of different ideas and a lot of different opinions, and it can just be so overwhelming. And then people can lose their curiosity, which can be devastating. I'm just curious, I mean, obviously, when you're doing coaching or you're doing training, um, well, I think anytime you're doing any of that, and you can agree or disagree with me and let me know, but you get a certain percentage of people that are interested, excited, ready to learn, a certain amount of people on the way other side that are not at all interested. They've seen it, they've heard it before, and some people in the middle that might be, depending on how things go, willing to go either way. How do you, in the work that you do, bring people on board when they might feel like, oh, here's something else?
That's
How do you
one
do
more
it?
thing. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, educators, plates are full. They're full,
right,
they're spinning, and then there's more stuff being loaded on. And then every year there's something new.
right.
And so I think that we have to recognize, right, that when educators say things like, I don't want to go to another PD, I don't think that what they're saying is, I'm done learning. I think what they are saying is, I'm up till 11 o'clock every single night writing
Right.
lesson plans and, laminating Pokemon cards or anything that I need to do. And I have to preserve a little bit of my own time, my own mental health, in order to show up again tomorrow. You know what I mean? And I really do feel that. And so I think one of the things that we've thought a lot about at Pine is, we have to show up for educators in lots of different ways. Um, Also, just like our kids, educators learn differently, right?
Mhm,
And so
mhm, mhm.
there are some educators who they want that PD. Like, just give me the course. I want to dive in. I want to digest it on my own. I'll come to you if I have questions, and that's how they learn. I think for others, they need to talk to a human. Like, I don't have time to read something. I don't have time to watch a video. Just like, I need to tell you what's going on. I need you to give me ideas,
Are you saying that
right?
educators might have different brains, just like
Oh,
kids?
shocking, right? Just like our
They might
kids.
learn differently. They might be
Yes.
neurodivergent. Yeah, yeah,
That, and many, and
yeah.
many. And I think
And
that,
the same things that we might do to help support kids learning might actually help with a
Differentiate,
wow.
differentiate, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Who knew?
That's right.
Right? And I think, when I was talking about like some of the methods and the mindsets, I think there are some educators for whom this work is really new
Mm,
and this work feels very foreign and this work feels very much like not what they signed up for,
mm, mm,
right? Um, I signed up for this. I only came into education because I wanted to do this work. I didn't want to do bulletin boards. I don't want to, I don't want to do the school concert. I want to do this work with kids who learn and think differently. Um, and not everyone came to do that type of work, and now they're having to do it. And I think that's a reality that we have to honor and we have to listen to. And so, for some of the folks for whom this just feels like too much, maybe what they need is just like, here's something to try. Here is the
right,
tool.
right, right,
Here is the scale.
right,
Here are the break cards.
right,
Just try it. Right.
right.
And by trying and doing and seeing the results,
Mhm.
sometimes that mindset shift can come. And I have
Yeah,
talked to teachers. I have talked
yeah.
to teachers for whom, I talked to them in October and they're like, I'm not, I was made to do this. I was made to have this conversation. This kid doesn't belong in my class. And then by April, I really do hear like, actually I have seen a change. Like I
Mm,
am
mm,
starting to think a little bit differently.
mm,
And
mhm.
it's not magic. And this work isn't fast. We know this, right? Um, and this work can be really hard. And you can do everything right and have it go wrong. And things that work with one kid will absolutely not work with another kid. And that relentless curiosity that is really required, and that willingness to take a risk and to, it's like we have to think outside the box because we're supporting students who think outside the box, right?
Mm,
The box
mhm,
is not
mhm,
helping. We have to get really creative. um, and I think that can be really interesting for some.
mm,
I think it can
mhm,
be really scary, for others, and I think it can feel really overwhelming.
mm.
And so, the two things that I always say to educators when they are feeling this kind of overwhelm is, number one, universal design is your friend,
Yeah.
right? If you have individual laminated supports for 7 of the kids in your class, you're going to make yourself completely bonkers trying to maintain all of them, right? How can we pull back and build in universal supports, even if they're uniquely designed for some of the kids in your class, but everyone can have access to them? That way, you're not doing the break program for one kid, you just have a break area for every kid. So I think that's one direction to kind of build supports into your everyday so you don't have to add on, add
Mm,
on, add on. I
mm,
think that's one area. And I think the other area is about interprofessional collaboration, right? Some of the best PD I ever got was listening to and watching the OTs and the SLPs and the school psychologists and the PTs doing their thing in my classroom.
mm, mm, mhm.
And instead of imagining that, okay, magic OT stuff happens in that room and magical speech happens in that room, how do we make the classroom the therapeutic environment and
Right.
work as an entire interprofessional team, um, to better understand and support the students really holistically,
Mm, mm.
which I think, again, it can feel really risky for an
Right,
educator.
right, right, right.
But I think bringing a little bit of humility and curiosity and, a willingness to collaborate
Mm,
with some
mm.
of the other folks in your building, I think can be invaluable.
Yeah. I love that a minute ago, relentless curiosity. I felt like
It's
that's
kind of
gonna be the next
forced.
T-shirt we put out, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's interesting, I'd taken another note while you were, kinda going through the deck, about the mindset and methods, and, when I
Where do you
first
fall? Which
well
comes
well,
first?
so
What do
so
you think?
here's what's interesting. Had you asked me that question before I listened to you and paused for a second and thought about it, I would have answered very definitively mindset.
Mhm,
But then but then I reflected a little bit on this, and I was listening to what you were saying, and I've always been a big mindset shift guy
mhm,
because I believe that when you shift your mindset, you begin to see things differently, and you see things differently, and you have an opportunity to respond differently, and so I've always been very convinced that like if you shift your mindset, like so many things are possible. But as I listened and as I thought and I kind of explored a little further, I thought, well, gee, but but methods aren't my typical starting place. But if you incorporate a method, it might lead to some curiosity. And if that method shows something promising, that could lead to a shift in mindset. So as I began very much in the mindset camp, I began to realize that, you know what, for some people, that method might be what gives them the mindset shift, kind of the push over that. So
Mhm.
again, I mean, as you started that slide, I'm like, oh, I know what camp I'm in. I'm like, I'm camp mindset over here. But again, I think that and this goes back to the heart of what we're talking about here. Different brains, different ways of learning, and again, I think some people are much more experiential than kind of like, okay, well, let me think about my mindset here and how I think about things. It's like, oh gosh, we did this and that worked, and oh, I see, so I would put myself on a 50-50 camp right now, and I'm not usually a 50-50 kind of guy. I'm usually a pretty strongly opinionated person, believe it or
Yeah.
not. So, yeah, I think it was a really interesting point. I wanna hit a, comment here real fast. This is from Kelly. Are you aware of other programs like the Connection program you mentioned in NYU that exist at other colleges or universities?
Yeah, Kelly, that's a great question. There's actually a lot of programs out there that are similar to the NYU Connections program. I would take a look at the College Autism Network. They have a lot of really great programs, and they have a lot of folks who are kind of represented there. I think that would be a really good resource for you to take a look at. Um, Stanford also has a really good collection of programs and lists. So you might want to take a look there as well.
Excellent. And let's see, we got a thank you here from Aaron as well. All right, and I just want to remind folks we're getting towards the end of our time here. So if you have any final questions or comments, feel free to put those in the chat, and we'll hit on a couple of other things here. I'm just going back to my notes here. One of the things you were talking about was interest, and really, you said something. I was having a conversation with a colleague earlier this week, and you said something that resonated with me because of that conversation. And you know, when we think about like interest, and we think about um, and again, I think sometimes people are resistant to embracing somebody's like changing the curriculum. But when you do, when you begin to really dive into somebody's interests, the most important thing that happens in the beginning of that is you're building the relationship. You're building the connection. You said that. You talked about the invitation and the connection,
Mhm.
and that was exactly the point I was making. It was like, when you become curious about what their interests are or what they like, or you're building the relationship, and that relationship then, of course, helps to foster felt safety, helps to foster, this is someone and you begin to cultivate that safety, and kind of thinking about like Bruce Perry's work, regulate, relate, reason. We want to get to the thinking, logical, rational part of our brain. We do that when we're safe and we're connected. So
Mhm.
there's so many more benefits. I mean, but I've seen cases where people have done that so beautifully, and it makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, it really does. And the heartbreaking story that I think of all the time is I was visiting classrooms, and I came to a door, and on the door of the classroom there was a picture of a train and a big X through it. And so I was like, what is this? Like what is this? I don't recognize this icon. I don't know what this is. And the teacher very proudly said, "This is a no train classroom." And I didn't know what that meant and was trying to
I'm
figure
afraid I
out what
do.
this
Yeah.
I'm afraid you do. And they had a kiddo who was a real train enthusiast in the classroom. This is New York City. We got a great
Mhm.
subway. Um, and the teacher felt that this interest in trains was detracting from his ability to connect to peers, connect to content, and that this was a real distraction and a point of perseveration.
Mhm.
And so it was a no train classroom. And I had to pull her out of the classroom and say, you just removed the thing that makes this kid's heart sing, the
Mhm.
thing that gets
Mhm.
him up in the morning, the thing that it helps him connect, the thing that helps him regulate,
Yep.
the thing that helps him make sense of the world. And so I would encourage you, instead of pulling away from trains, you need to meet him and become a train enthusiast yourself. Try not to fake it. Like, invite him for lunch and have him tell
Yeah.
you everything about trains, and find this point of connection. Leverage it, not to force him to do things, not so that you can remove it and have him earn it. You teach math through trains, you read about trains, he writes about trains, you teach everything, use it as a metaphor, you know, lean into this and learn to love it in a way that is, maybe close to. It's never going to be what he truly experiences, because this is his thing. And I think all too often we make these snap judgments, and I don't believe we would ever do that to a typically developing kid.
Hmm, hmm,
Figure
hmm.
out what they love the most,
Right.
and then take it from them.
Right, right. You mentioned that earlier, and of course, I think you probably have a pretty good, a pretty good feeling for a lot of my opinions around a lot of these behavioral approaches, where you do just that. You find the thing that means something, and then you use it as a contingent reward upon them doing something you
Yeah.
want them to do. I mean, what a way to not only kill intrinsic motivation, but what a way to build anxiety and you know
Erode trust.
erode trust and destroy relationships, right? I mean, you're moving into that dynamic, but unfortunately, it's still something that very commonly happens
Yeah.
in a lot of the spaces that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So we are nearing the end of our time here, and I want to give you an opportunity if there's anything else that you'd like to share. I know we got to mention your event earlier, but is there anything else that you'd like to share, or things that you might make people aware of, or how might somebody connect with you? Just to make share with you, our audience here, and I think we have a lot of parents, we have a lot of
Mhm.
caregivers, we have a lot of self advocates, teachers, paraprofessionals, administrators, OTs, SLPs, a lot of people kind of coming together to work to do better. And so anything you'd like to share in terms of how they might connect with you or learn more about your work or get involved in some way?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, first of all, I'll share my email. My
Okay.
email is Lauren, Lauren, at pineprogram.org. So I love to hear from folks. I want to hear what's happening in schools. What do you wish was happening in schools? If your school is doing something really interesting in the inclusion space, I'd love to hear about it. Always looking to kind of to learn alongside the community. We'd love to see folks at the summit. Again, tickets go on sale on March 2nd. We'd really love to see a lot of folks there. It's a great opportunity to really come together as educators and parents and advocates and community members who are really committed to neuro inclusion. And then I think the last thing that I would just kind of remind everyone, and I think this is going to be preaching to the choir, but perhaps you could remind someone else in your own community about this, is we all play a role in building neuro-inclusive spaces. Every single person, it doesn't matter what your role is, it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter how old you are, whether you're 8 or 80, right? You play a role in building inclusive spaces. So thinking about what is one thing that you can do, today, tomorrow, and next week, and beyond, to really make sure that you are holding space for all kinds of minds.
Thank you so much. And just a couple of quick comments here. Marion, our friend from Australia, said, "Thank you so much. Support adults, carers, and individuals. Children become adults, and all this is still so valuable, essential understanding." Casey asked if they could put your email in chat, and I think
Yep,
Courtney just did, so it should be there. But you're welcome to pop
perfect.
it there. Up, it looks like she put it there again, so it
Yep.
should be there as well. I want to share one last quick thing, and then I'm going to ask you one final question. I got a text message a few minutes ago from my friend Doris Bowman, and earlier when I was talking about their sponsorship, I said they were going to update their webpage, and through the magic of the internet, they made the update, and what you'll see here is they've extended a 40% discount to the end of this month on your FBA as a fantasy. They also now are sharing the information about their brand new book that's coming out. It's called Facing the Fantasy and Finding a Way Forward. That's coming out really soon. We're actually going to be doing a podcast about it as well. So folks are welcome to join us. So again, check out that page that they set up for our podcast listeners, and you can get some special discounts and learn more about the work that they're doing as well. So with that, I want to leave you with kind of one final question here. Any final thoughts? Anything you want to leave us with? Words of inspiration or whatever it may be. Do you have any final thoughts as we wrap up today?
I would say, if you're a social media person, or even if you're not, find a neurodivergent person to follow, to listen to learn from. There's a lot of great folks. You can start with Sunny Wise, who I mentioned earlier, who's got some fantastic resources. But find members of the community of lived experience, and begin to listen.
Love it. Love it. All right. Well, we're going to wrap up there. I want to thank everybody for joining us here today. We appreciate you being here. Want to encourage you, if you watch us today, you found it useful. If you're a parent, share this with other parents or your school. If you're an educator, share it with your colleagues. When we share these programs and we share the work that's being done, this is how we make progress. So just want to encourage you to do that. I want to thank you again, Lauren, for being here. It was great to have you here today. I'm really excited about the conversation. Great to meet your dog too. Love
I was going
meeting
to say,
dogs.
Biscuit says thank you as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. Well, Biscuit is always welcome here. In fact, we're going to get Biscuit a little podium. So, next time Biscuit can join you
Oh,
up there.
apparently he can open a door, so
Yeah.
I think we got to get him his own show.
Well, actually, it looked like somebody might have been doing laundry back there for a second.
Oh,
So-
okay, so that could happen. That could happen. You never know. We never know.
All
At least
good.
I'm not doing it.
That's all right. That's all right. All right. Well, we're going to say goodbye. If you would just stick around for me for 1 second here. And thank you, everybody, again for being here. And
Thanks
we
so
will
much.
see you again. I think we have a special episode coming up soon. So we'll see you again soon. And thank you for being here. Thank you for making this part of your day. And with that, we'll see you.